Welcome back, everyone. We are so glad that you are here. We are going to be doing Revelation chapter 12 today. And I think we got the video working, and we're also going to be doing all kinds of fun stuff here. I'm going to let you see a screen and check out our new website where you can be able to find all of the recordings here as well. But anyway, I hope you are blessed by this Bible study, and I hope that you can continue to be a blessing to others. Take care and bless you. All right, okay. Yes.
I know you're recording these.
Mm-hmm.
Now, is there a way to get in on the website for the ones that I missed? Because I know I missed one.
Yes, so all of them are actually on our website, our new website.
Okay.
And if you go to, I think it's members on the website.
Okay.
And then you can go to studies, and it's at the very bottom of that. But here, let me pull it up. I'll just show everybody real quick here. And this will be online, hopefully, and it's being recorded so you can be able to see where it's at. So here's our new website here. And if you come over to, not members, join us, and then there's studies.
Okay.
And then if you scroll down, this is the book that we're basing our studies off of here. And then if you go to the very bottom, there it is. There's Revelation Day 11, and then you have all of the other days right here.
Oh, wonderful.
That you can be able to see and watch. And as we put more stuff up, you can actually change. You can change it by what series it is, or by the date, or who the speaker is, or by the title, or whatever else. So and you can also do that same thing with worship. If you go to join us and go to worship, then you just scroll to the bottom. There's our latest worship service. And you can be able to see stuff there too. So,
fantastic.
Anyway,
thank you so much.
Yeah. So it's the Join Us, ziaumc.org. .org. And you can put prayer requests in there, and it goes straight to myself, and we can be praying for you and add you to the prayer. It's just such a neat thing.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah, and if people are online, they want to type in all the information that they were here, and we can count them for attendance, then they can fill it all out, and I mean it's such a great thing. Yeah, it's going to be a good thing. All right, now I'm going to see if I can make this a little larger here, because we are trying to record the whole screen, and I hope and pray I can see if Seville jumps on and I can let him come in here. All right, now I'll go back to the internet here and go. All right, so we're going to start with Revelation chapter 12. Let's do chapter 12. We'll read verses 1 through 6, if that's okay. Whoever.
A wondrous sign appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and a crown of 12 stars on her head. She was pregnant and cried out in pain as she was about to give birth. Then another sign appeared in heaven, an enormous red dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns and 7 crowns on its heads. Its tail swept a third of the stars out of the sky and flung them to the earth. The dragon stood in front of the woman who was about to give birth, so that it might devour her child the moment he was born. She gave birth to a son, a male child, who will rule all the nations with an iron scepter, and her child was snatched up to God into his throne.
Okay, and go ahead and read verse 6 too.
The woman fled into the wilderness to a place prepared for her by God, where she might be taken care of for 1,260 days.
Perfect. Okay, thank you so much. All right, so wow, what an amazing image of this is. This I grew up in a time where I loved anything Lord of the Rings. I loved dragons. I thought they were the coolest thing on the planet, and so I always loved this part of Revelation because it has a dragon in it. I was like, how often do you get to find a dragon in the Bible? It's just too much fun to be able to read about it. So, all right, so the first thing that comes up here, and just in verse 1 there, is that it's saying that this is a great sign. Good Lord, we haven't had any signs yet? I mean, this is... So for this one to actually be a great sign, that's pretty much of a big flashing light saying, hey, this is probably maybe even more possibly important than the other signs around it. So that's pretty interesting. A book filled with signs. This one's actually mentioned as a great one. But okay, so the question is who is this woman? That's one of the biggest challenges a lot of people have to answer, and try to figure out who this woman was or is. And a lot of people, you're going to find a lot of people that translate that and read that, interpret the woman to be the church. But it doesn't make sense, because the church is not the one that's birthing its own Messiah. It just doesn't, Jesus didn't come from the church. Jesus came from God. And so then we have to look at towards the end of the pregnancy, and just examples of how this woman is described, and try to figure out who the woman is. So we have to look at her attributes. Now, she is clothed with the sun, and John has already used that imagery to describe God, by the way, in the past, and Jesus. The moon is under her feet. Now, a lot of people are saying, what in the world is the moon under her feet supposed to provide, or supposed to say to us? But we have to realize that the entire worship of Israel is based off of the lunar cycle. The lunar cycle is the way they base their worship. So it was not a solar-based, it was lunar-based. And so all of the festivals, everything that when it came to being able to celebrate God, that is always based around a lunar calendar. And so when you're seeing that the moon is under her feet, you're seeing that all of the festivals and the Sabbaths and all the full moon festivals and Sabbaths, it is literally showing that this woman is enthroned on the worship of Israel, which is a pretty beautiful image, if you think about it. I love that image of that. And then, of course, we have God is here, seen enthroned on the worship of Israel. And then we have the 12 tribes of Israel, the stars, and Joseph sees 12 tribes as the stars, and Israel as the crown in his head. And all of this imagery for the time period would also be imagery for a god. So, when they represented one of their gods, they were clothed with the sun, and, standing on the moon or the sun or something else like that. So it really is pretty clear that this woman is God, is a representation of God. So if you have any problems with God only being male or only being female or something like that, then you're going to have to deal with it here. Because here John is actually showing, at least giving this image, this image that God is a woman, is like a woman too. So I love that. I always love to give everybody a hard time about, well, I don't know, Revelation showed God as a woman. So, but okay, all right. So, and I have to mention something. I preached a Christmas sermon one time when I was doing my church plant, and I preached it at the big church that was helping sponsor the church plant, and I used this text for a Christmas sermon, and everyone was like, "What are you doing? You are crazy." Even the pastor was like, "Okay, I trust you, but this is going to be weird." And so I actually showed them. I was telling them, when's the last time you saw a creche with the shepherds and the sheep and the horses and the goats and everything else? And then you have the angel at the top, and you have Mary there, and here's Joseph, and here's Mary giving birth to Jesus, and there's a dragon right in her crotch, ready to devour and eat the baby. Yeah, so it's not very common in the creche. A little boy came up to me after the service and had drawn the creche with a dragon eating the baby coming out of Mary. It was awesome. So I said, well, so I guess we need to start putting dragons in our nativity scenes. I don't think you're going to find that at a Christian bookstore.
Don't eat the baby though.
Yeah. Didn't get to eat the baby. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But anyway, all right. So, so that's what we're doing here. The woman is God, at least in this image, it's God. And we have the baby, which is Jesus, the Messiah. And now it's actually talking about in verse 3, here's another sign, and it's talking about the dragon this time. Now, the dragon is red, and it's having 7. Now, I'm not sure what your translation says, but does it say crowns, or does it say diadems, or does it say, mine says cornets. It says crowns.
It says
7 heads,
Seven heads.
10 horns, and 7 crowns on his
All right,
head.
7 heads, 10 horns.
And 7 crowns on
10
his
horns,
Okay.
7 crowns.
Okay, and then Marie has the indigenous, the Native American translation.
A great fire red, so serpent with 7 heads and 10 horns. On each of its 7 heads it wore a headdress of a chief.
A headdress of a chief. Oh, that's cool. And yours, Julian, what's yours say?
Mine says diadem.
Diadems. Okay. All right. So, well, with all of that stuff out there, I want you to know that the true translation should be diadems and not crowns.
Can you spell that?
It should be diadems. Diadems, I think.
Yep.
D-E-M.
S. So a diadem is still like a crown, except it's worn by people that don't have the full authority of a king or a queen, and they have a diadem instead. Okay? So it's very important because someone else will have a crown later on. This one does not have crowns. This one has diadems. Okay? And diadems are not as good as a crown, basically. But now we have 2 numbers here. We have the number 7, we have the number 10. Both of those mean what I preached on today. It means completeness or wholeness, right? So if this creature, this dragon, has is it 7 horns? No, 10 horns. No, 7 heads and 10 horns. Okay, 7 heads, 10 horns. Either one of them. So if you have a horn, that is actually talking about how much power you have, because I'm sorry, you're not going to mess with an animal that has horns. That's pretty powerful. So you run into any bull and have a bull wearing red, you're going to find out how much power the bull has. But so we're talking about a being, and now of course, if you have 7 heads, then that's your beingness. I mean, this is where we do all of our being is in our heads, our hearts too, but most of the time the symbolism is in your heads. So this is a person. This is a being that is complete in beingness and complete in power. So it has a lot of power, and it has a lot. It knows its own being. And then in verse 4, it was into the earth, and here we find the dragon waiting to eat the baby. So this woman's in stirrups, and it's not the doctor ready to receive the baby. It's the dragon wanting to devour it. And so what we're really seeing here, and I think it's very clear that the dragon is who we would say is Satan, or whatever you want to say, the father of lies, or whatever you want to call Satan. But in his inner desire, like the core being of who Satan is one that has an inner attitude of rebellion, of just desiring to rebel. The inner being of rebellion. And so his desire is to take God upon himself, is to absorb God, to take God and become God himself. Does this sound a little bit like what the serpent was trying to say would happen if they eat the fruit? Oh, you're going to be like God. That he just doesn't want you to know that. So he's actually probably tempting them with the same thing he probably desires in the core of his being anyway. So this is the origin of Satan's rebellion here. 1/3 of the stars fallen are the fallen angels. That makes sense. We've heard of the fallen angels, and so they became the demons and things like that. Now, in 2nd Psalm, we have an understanding of a rod of iron, and that, again, is mostly talking about a Messiah. And so that's just an echoing of 2nd Psalm in Revelation, still pointing out that this baby is Jesus, is the Messiah. And then this birth is just like any other birth. It's the incarnation of God. So we say that about Jesus all the time, that Jesus is the representation of God and in human form. And so that he is incarnate. God became flesh in Jesus. Now, and it says the baby was snatched away. It actually says it was snatched away. And that's the part that the dragon did get. So the dragon snatched the baby. A lot of people read that and saying, well, God snatched the baby or whatever else. But the dragon snatched the baby. So that is a representation of the cross. That's part of that death piece of Christ. But this is the cross of Jesus, and a revelation in history But the cross is simply a representation of who God is at God's core. Yes, it was an event in history, but it's even deeper than that. It's actually the very being of God is one of cruciform, one of dying on the cross selflessly. The very essence of God's being is found in the cross. So God is a God that births his own Son into the very mouth of sin for the purpose of redemption. And so this image is just mind-bogglingly beautiful and scary, of course, but God is a God that births his own Son into the very mouth of sin for the purpose of redemption. I have written down in my notes here, there's a book called Crossivity by Michael Gorman. I've never read the book. I don't know who it is, but if I wrote it down, I'm sure my professor knows what he's talking about. You can go read the book if you want to. All right, in verse 6, we know the woman's God, and so the woman fled into the wilderness, and being prepared by herself that he may be nourished for 1,260 days. It's about 3.5 years, and we've kind of talked about 3.5 years in the past. But what happens in the wilderness? Anytime you hear wilderness, it needs to be thinking about something. And that the stuff in the wilderness is where Israel first meets God, is in the wilderness.
Yes.
But it's also the Jewish pool of imagery has two understandings. So it's not only the place where you meet God, but it's also the place of the demonic and of Satan. So, because that's where you're tempted. You know, that's where the temptation happens with Christ and Satan. So John is saying God, present in the wilderness, needing to be taken care of by himself, nourished and fed. But the signs can only be signs. It can't be grasped, basically. But God is firmly in the realm of Satan here. But Satan is not allowed in God's realm. So God is actually saving by dying. And, you know, all that just kind of juxtaposition kind of imagery is kind of what's going on here. But I love the fact that God is in the middle of Satan's world, but Satan can never reach the world of God. All right, so that's through verse 6. I gave you a bunch of stuff right there. That's a little bit. But any questions or any thoughts on that, or do you want to keep going? All right, we'll keep going. So let's read 7 through 12, whoever would like to read.
I'll read.
Okay.
And there was war in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon and his angels fought back. But he was not strong enough, and they lost their place in heaven. The great dragon was hurled down, that ancient serpent called the devil, or Satan, who leads the whole world astray. He was hurled to the earth, and his angels with him. Continue.
Yeah, we'll go ahead and go through 12.
Okay. Then I heard a loud voice in heaven saying, "Now have come the salvation and the power and the kingdom of our God and the authority of his Christ. For the accuser of our brothers who accuses them before our God day and night has been hurled down. They overcame him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony. They did not love their lives so much as to shrink from death."
And just one more
Therefore
verse.
rejoice, you heavens, and you who dwell in them. But woe to the earth and the sea, because the devil has gone down to you. He is filled with fury because he knows that his time is short.
Okay, all right.
No wonder there's so much anger.
Yeah, we're talking about all this anger stuff, and
Yeah.
that's where Satan went, is where all the anger was.
Yeah, Satan's
Makes
there.
sense. Makes sense, yeah. All right, so, yes, all right, so verse 7, we have a war in heaven now. The image of Michael, the guardian angel, is not an unusual image in Jude or in Daniel. So in Jude, Michael is arguing for the soul of Moses. In Daniel, Michael is the defender of Israel. I don't know if any of you still have any deep Catholic connections or not, but we just actually had the feast day of Michael the Archangel. So you probably heard a bunch of people saying, asking Michael to be protecting them and fighting for them or something else like that. That's a very common kind of a thing there. But here we have this image of Michael. And it's some really strange grammar that's going on here in the Greek. Michael's purpose is to make war against those who rebel against God. But this is the primary one. So the dragon starts the war, not Michael. And if you step off the building, who starts the war? You or gravity? It's you can blame gravity for it, but you're the one who stepped off the ledge there. So the dragon is the one who's starting the war, not Michael. And Michael is the one fighting against it. So if you follow God in a relationship, then you will be a part of the good part of it. All right, so the correct translation is the dragon and his angels instigated a war in heaven, and Michael and his angels fought back. That's how it really should be read. Again, I'll say that the dragon and his angels instigated a war in heaven, and Michael and his angels fought back. And because of that, there was no longer a place for them in heaven. Which kind of makes sense. All right, so now we actually have 3 different names for Satan here. We have, that's right. So we have Satan, we have dragon, and we have deceiver. And so that's just kind of what it is. And then, of course, the dragon was cast into the earth. All right, so now, in verse 10, this should sound a lot like the 7th trumpet in chapter 11, where we were seeing the cross in chapter 11 on that trumpet. But now John is taking that reality and showing us before the very foundations of the world that the cross is the victory of God that resides in the very nature of God's being. That's what I was saying earlier. So the cross is the revelation of God over rebellion. So the very nature of God is one that includes some form of sacrifice for the sake of being able to have redemption over the rebellion. How is all this before the creation of the world? Because there had to be a Satan deceiver before the fall of creation. That's all there is to it. There wasn't the fall. Remember, we had original goodness and original blessing way before we had original sin. And most people don't ever want to focus on the original blessing, but they always want to focus on the original sin. But we had to have something that would cause that fall piece, and so that's stuff that happened all before the creation, before the creation of the world. Now, in verse 11, conquered by him by the blood of the Lamb, here's the cross again, who's doing the conquering piece, and they did not love their souls more than death. Is how it could be. It should be translated. And then we have this woe to the earth and the sea, and that the devil knows his time is short. Now, I've said this before, I think, but there's a difference. There's a lot of different translations of time in the Greek. You have chronos, which is what we would consider time. That's days of the week in my watch, and it has hours and minutes and things like that. But you also have another kind of time that's called kairos time. And kairos time is just the perfect time, God's perfect timing. So I wouldn't say, I just met my wife at the perfect time. Well, that's not saying I met her on February the 13th at 4:30 p.m. in 12 minutes. It's just saying I met her at the perfect time. It was just God's timing, kind of a thing. And so that's the kind of time that it's talking here. It's not talking about a literal, physical time, but the perfect exact time of his realm is brief, is very short. Okay? All right. We're still good as far as time here. Let's go ahead and let's just finish out the chapter. We'll read 13 through 18, whoever would like to read.
When the dragon saw that he had hurled to the earth, he pursued the woman who had given birth to the male child. The woman was given the 2 wings of a great eagle so that she might fly to the place prepared for her in the wilderness, where she would be taken care of for a time, and half a time out of the serpent's reach. Then from his mouth the serpent spewed water like a river to overtake the woman and sweep her away with a torrent. But the earth helped the woman by opening its mouth and swallowing the river that the dragon had spewed out of the mouth. Then the dragon was enraged at the woman and went off to make war against the rest of her offspring, those who could keep God's command and hold fast their testimony about Jesus.
Okay. There's a little bit more, I think.
The
Or is
beast
there?
out of the sea. The dragon stood on the shore of the sea, and I saw a beast coming out of the sea. It had 10 horns and 7 heads.
Okay. Perfect. All right. Thank you. All right. So, okay, we have the woman now. The dragon, of course, was like, hey, well, while I'm on earth, then I'm going to go after that lady. Because again, the very core being of Satan is to be able to take God upon himself and to be able to rebel. So why not go after God that's in the wilderness? And then here the woman has 2 wings from a great eagle. And I don't know if anyone knows this really famous scripture, but in Exodus 9:4, I bore you on eagle's wings. And so here's already, again, we're just bringing in all this imagery from the Old Testament and need to be adding it into Revelation before we actually try to translate it. So this is another image to reinforce that this woman is God. Because God in Exodus 9:4 was the one who provided the wings as eagles, and you kind of go from there. Now, there is some incarnation of God in all of these areas. We have some incarnation of God as the Creator Covenant God. We have some incarnation of God in Israel. We have some incarnation of God as Mary. God is present in the midst of all of Satan's realm in all those areas. Now, rivers, especially floods in the Old Testament imagery, are part of the havoc, the demonic realm, the chaos. And why was that? Because they would flood and destroy entire villages and cities, all kinds of stuff. Water was so scarce there, they would want to build all their homes right next to the river, and then they would have these 100-year floods that would destroy and kill them all. And so the flood aspect is the piece that we should be hearing there. And it would just make sense. That's just the imagery. That's what's going on there. Is it would make sense that the dragon of Satan is where all these floods are coming from. Again, trying to create chaos and try to create rebellion. But Satan cannot get God out of his realm. The earth actually comes to the help of the woman, opens up, and even Satan's realm is under the control of the woman. Did you hear that? Because apparently Satan was given control over the earth. But here's the earth rebelling against Satan. Not even Satan has control. Is under the control of, it's all under the control of the woman. Now, what about this woman being nourished in the wilderness in verse 14? It's an ongoing need, so it's not just was nourished, it is being nourished. And then you have a time, times, and half a time. So that's basically 3.5 years. And we can see chapter 11 verse 2 for what we talked about with that one. But again, this is also the same number of times it said it up there. It just said it in days instead of the 1,000. What was it? 1,260 something. Anyway, you get the idea. It's about 3.5 years. And God is constantly there. God is constantly there, living amongst the realm of Satan, and Satan can't get rid of God. It's just awesome. It's got to frustrate Satan so much. But this is the great sign, something that is difficult to understand, or in John's case, very hard to explain. He's just trying to explain all of this stuff that he is experiencing. And that's when we have all these similes and metaphors and things like that. Now, in verse 17, the dragon was angry with the woman. Yeah, well, of course. You'd be ticked off too. Now, who are the rest of her seed? I don't know if you saw that in verse 17. No. But the rest of her seed are the ones that are keeping the commandments of God and the witnesses of Jesus. So if you're keeping the commandments of God, that would definitely explain the Old Testament and the Old Testament community, the Old Covenant. And if you're keeping the witness of Jesus, then you're actually talking about the New Testament community and the New Covenant. So here we're seeing the rest of her seed are all those that were the Israelites in the Old Testament as well as the Christians in the New Testament. So one of the ways Satan tries to get God out of his realm is he starts going against the very seed of the woman that are keeping the presence of God around. Does that make sense? So okay, fine. If I can't attack you, then I'm going to attack all your kids. Because your kids, through all of their prayers and their worship and everything else, is how you're kind of sustaining yourself here. So I'm going to have to get rid of them then, instead of trying to get rid of just you. And then verse 18, the dragon, it just says he stood, but it's talking about the dragon, stood, and then it says later in the, either one doesn't change, but later on he says that he stood in the, he stood or I stood, either one doesn't change. So it says that if it was he stood, then it's just talking about the dragon there. But it also could be understood as John stood on the sand beside the sea. Later on, it actually talks about John moving into the best position to see the vision. And so it could be taken either way if you want to, but it's just kind of FYI kind of a thing about talking about the dragon. Because the dragon's going to have a very, very powerful role when it comes to the sea coming up here. But, all right. I've got 12:04. I don't know if we want to stop here and kick back up with verse 13, or if you want to get some verse 13 in. I don't know. What would y'all like to do? Stop? Okay. All right. I gave you a bunch. I get it. All right. So, well, I hope everyone kind of had fun with this. I don't know if it was entertaining to you or not. I loved imagining it all. But it always is kind of fun to be able to see and to know just a different way of understanding Revelation. It's really a very powerful way to see. But I love the understanding of it, of the very being and the very existence of God includes the cross. That is just so powerful to think about. And then, of course, this understanding of Satan at the very core of Satan's being is rebellion and wanting to take God upon himself and wanting that same power, that same desire for whatever that is. It kind of does a good job of giving at least a basis for kind of the problem of evil and of course how God deals with the problem of evil in a selfless, sacrificial way. So anyway, it's really beautiful imagery if we don't imagine that it's all kinds of weird stuff. Oh, I did see something on Facebook that I took a picture of, so I want to show it to everybody here because it's Revelation based, but it has a cat riding on a dog, and the dog is white, and it says, "And I looked, and behold, a pale horse, and the rider's name was Death." And so it's the the cat on the back of the dog. And again, of course, I've been telling everybody about how we always want to shove all this imagery and stuff, but that was a cute way of talking about that. Yeah, it's not as scary as the other stuff there, but I just thought that was a cute story of this cat riding on the back of a dog. But if you don't remember what we talked about when we talked about all the different horses and the riders, go back, watch some of the videos. We have them all on the website, and you can be able to watch those things. The last two videos are only just audio because I didn't get the video working properly. So I don't know if this is going to be correct or not because I can't ever see if it's recording right and properly until after I do it all. So anyway, but I love you all. Thank you so much for coming as always. I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful day and wonderful week. And maybe we'll all get to watch balloons, whether it's either on the TV or in person. And I hope everyone has a wonderful week. And maybe we can enjoy I love cloudy weather. I love rain. I love any kind of precipitation. Sometimes it makes people depressed, but I can find joy pretty much everywhere if I need to. But I hope we can all enjoy a little bit of the rain that's going to be expected this week as well. So anyway, love y'all. Peace be with you. Blessings. And I hope you all have a wonderful week.
God bless you.
Bless you
Love
too,
you.
Janet.
Love you all.
Dorothy.